It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nana, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online. Across England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tonight on Farage, a community protest in Knowsley on Merseyside turned violent on Friday night, leaving people being labelled as far right. Are the people of that part of Liverpool really far right? We'll talk about that. A Brexiteers summit? No, a Rejoiners summit. Michael Gove and Lord Mandelson working together to achieve what? I'm not sure. We'll talk about spy balloons being shot down, 4 of them, over the course of the weekend. And Brian Howsam joins me on Talking Pints. He's the CEO, Stay Sure, the big travel company. He's going to tell you how to become a successful entrepreneur. All of that after the news with Polly Middlehurst.
Nigel, thank you. It's 7 o'clock and the top stories on GB News tonight. Downing Street has refused to comment on spy balloons potentially being spotted all over the UK. The United States says it's not yet been able to identify recent objects found in North American airspace after shooting down a 4th object in just over a week. Rishi Sunak has said the country does have the military capability to keep the nation's skies safe.
We have something called the Quick Reaction Alert Force, which involves Typhoon planes, which are kept on 24/7 readiness to police our airspace, which is incredibly important. I can't obviously comment in detail on national security matters, but we're in constant touch with our allies. And as I said, we'll do whatever it takes to keep the country safe.
And the White House in America has been at pains to say there is no indication of extraterrestrial activity. It has said China has a high-altitude balloon program to gather intelligence.
We assessed whether they were sending any communication signals. We detected none. We looked to see whether they were maneuvering or had any propulsion capabilities. We saw no signs of that. We did, however, assess that their altitudes were considerably lower than the Chinese high-altitude balloon and did pose a threat to civilian commercial air traffic. And while we have no specific reason to suspect that they were conducting surveillance of any kind, we couldn't rule that out.
Now, rescuers in southern Turkey have saved several children today, a full week after devastating earthquakes shook the region. A 13-year-old boy and a 10-year-old girl were among those pulled out alive from the rubble of collapsed buildings, having been buried for more than 180 hours. The number of people that have died in both Turkey and Syria has now risen to 37,000. As officials say, the window of finding any remaining survivors is closing. An appeal here by the UK's Disasters Emergency Committee has so far raised more than £60 million. NATO has said a new Russian offensive in Ukraine has already begun. Secretary-General Jens Stoltenberg said today he sees no signs of Russia preparing for peace, as Moscow has been sending in yet more troops and weapons. He believes Ukraine now needs fighter jets and long-range missiles to counter any new attack and to recapture lost territory. And lastly, Buckingham Palace has said this afternoon the Queen Consort has tested positive for COVID after suffering from what she thought were just cold symptoms. GB News understands Camilla remains in good spirits and is resting up, but is said to be disappointed she's unable to make this week's engagements across the country. Camilla was forced to postpone a visit to the West Midlands earlier on today. You're up to date on TV, online and DAB+ radio. This is GB News, the People's Channel, where now it's time for Farage.
Good evening. Well, the scene was Knowsley on Merseyside. It was Friday evening, and what happened there had been bubbling away for months, and it was to do with young men in a migrant hotel. Parents of a school, a girls' school, just down the road becoming increasingly concerned. Now, of course, mainstream media will tell you there is no hard evidence, but a strong belief in that community that young men who are living in that hotel were talking to girls, often underage girls, and a video emerged, and that seemed to light the blue touch paper as far as the community was concerned. They announced they'd be holding a protest, which led to a counter-protest from Care for Calais. And then something extraordinary and really rather horrible happened. Some young men turned up, dressed in black, with backpacks, carrying sledgehammers and fireworks, and they proceeded to smash in the front windows of a police van. That led to condemnation from right across the political spectrum. Foreign Office Minister Andrew Mitchell said the violence was completely unacceptable. Well, we agree with that, Mr. Mitchell. He said, we have a duty to look after these people. Well, yes, but equally, they have a duty to behave. Lisa Nandy, Shadow Levelling Up Secretary, said all of this was a result of a toxic mix of the anti-migrant rhetoric coming from the government. And Claire Mosley, the founder of the so-called refugee charity Care for Calais, said she was worried about the poor men in the hotel and she was trying to get in touch with them. Well, Claire, I'd have thought you've got all their phone numbers already. After all, Care for Calais meet people in the camps in Dunkirk, give them advice how to cross the English Channel, and then often meet them on the beaches in Kent with food parcels and all else. I wouldn't have thought you were short, particularly of phone numbers. Tim Nor-Hilton of Refugee Action talked about people, a baying mob who are the far right, whether you want to be called it or not. And local MP Sir George Howarth said those demonstrating against refugees at the protest tonight do not represent this community. Well, Mr. Howarth, I've got news for you. They really do represent that community. What I don't know is who those young men in those black uniforms were. I have no idea who they were. Were they far right? Could they have been Antifa? I simply can't answer that question, but I'm pleased to say that in the last hour, Merseyside police have confirmed that it was initially a peaceful protest and then some people arrived and it turned violent. But let me ask you at home, do you think the people of Knowsley should be called far right? Let me know your thoughts, Farage at gbnews.uk. Nobody has been speaking up on behalf of that community. It simply hasn't been allowed. And when you approach members of that community in Knowsley and ask them to speak, they're generally just too terrified to do so. They're worried, I guess, that they show their face and the national media will be knocking on the door the next day, going through every Facebook post they've ever made and perhaps making their life a misery. I also think that much of the rhetoric that we've had from Sky News, the BBC, mainstream politicians, is to say, don't any of you ever dare protest about migrant hotels or you'll be classed as far right too. And we've seen very similar tactics to do with the protests in Ireland. My fear, my genuine fear, is that we're only at the beginning of this process. I'm hoping and praying that all these young men, those that have thrown their passports into the English Channel, that are coming into this country, my prayer is we do not become like Malmo and Stockholm in Sweden. Well, joining me down the line, Merseyside freelance journalist Justin Dunn. Justin, good evening and thank you for joining me.
Hi, Nigel.
Justin, tell me something. When I think of Knowsley, I think of one of the safest Labour seats in the country, a place that has voted Labour. I mean, is Knowsley a hotbed of the far right? Please help.
The idea of finding almost anybody who is far right in Knowsley, or indeed Merseyside as a whole, is like trying to find white dog poo in the North Pole. It isn't going to happen. It doesn't exist. These are genuinely concerned mums and dads and uncles and aunties. And as always, because it's in Liverpool, Liverpool gets the kicking.
Yes, I think there is something to that. Liverpool does always attract, it seems, negative national media headlines. But tell me something. Have we any idea who these really dangerous people were that turned up with the sledgehammers? Who the hell were they?
In all honesty, Nigel, I couldn't tell you. I've spoken to, as you know, quite a few people over the weekend. We know there are always lunatics and fools who turn up to these things. It's sadly what happens, but we know this from protests around the country, never mind here. You'll always get idiots. But this was started out as a peaceful protest, as you pointed out earlier, to say that we're not happy. These were mums and dads who had gone to the council. They'd gone to the police. They complained to all the people they're meant to be able to complain to, and no one listened. So when they advertised that they were going to have their own protest, obviously the counter-protest got organised, and then we saw what happened on Friday night. I don't know who the sledgehammer people are, but I can very much vouch that they were nothing to do with the people who actually organised the protest in the first place.
And Justin, as a freelance journalist, the northwest of the country has seen a higher proportion of migrant hotels than any other part of the UK. And it's been going on now for the last 3 years.
Yeah.
Do you believe there genuinely is evidence that makes these parents, uncles and aunties concerned? Does the evidence exist?
Well, I can honestly not answer that question properly, Nigel, because I don't have the information at my fingertips, and it'd be wrong to do otherwise. However, what is interesting is that why is it always these poor communities that these people are sent to? are never the rich ones. I don't see any hostels opening in Kensington or Islington or Highbury or Highgate or whatever. I'm sure there are some in the south of England, but they tend to be in poor communities. And we just get dumped.
That's a very, very fair point.
And if we dare to say anything, and you and I have previous on this, which we should say, when it happened in Hoylake previously, is that if you dare to say anything, then you're a racist or you're a bigot or you're whatever.
I know.
These people are not far
It's
shocking.
shocking.
These
It's
are
shocking.
dyed-in-the-wool Labour voters, Nigel. Dyed-in-the-wool Labour voters.
And actually, Justin, thank you. And I've got one of them on the line right now. I've got Ged on the line now from Knowsley. Ged, they're saying terrible things about your community. Why do you have a problem, is the question. Why do you have a problem with that migrant hotel and the young men in it?
Well, first of all, we're not racist. Never have been. Liverpool for years has welcomed refugees, which everyone knows that. Most Scousers are immigrants anyway, we're Irish. So the reason this has all come to a fore, and just happened with that one video. It's been going on for months where they've been coming from that hotel, going into the local skate park and trying to entice young girls with ale, different stuff. I don't live in those, I mean, Croxteth, but we're part of there. That night, the people that turned up were people, they were mums, dads, granddads, grandmothers, sisters, brothers. They were just there to say, we want people to listen to us and people to come onto the estate and start stopping this. Because it's going on, no one seems to be stopping it. They're all saying, yeah, we'll check it out, we'll do that. And, you know, why doesn't that Care for Calais go and speak to the people? She's saying that our kids are vulnerable. We're all here for our kids. We all want our kids to be safe. We're vulnerable, our kids. Our kids can't go to school without getting enticed. There's a school in Knowsley Village. They've actually put netting up because the immigrants were standing looking through the fence at the kids. And that's a fact. Now, all we want safety for our kids. And as you said, I've seen no women in that hotel. I live not far from that hotel. I've seen no women. I've seen loads of young men. They were playing football on the local pitch. There's like 40 of them on the local pitch playing football. I haven't seen no women.
Ged, I have to say, I have to say, you know, the general point that Liverpool has been one of the most welcoming places over the centuries is absolutely right. And yet, Ged, when I talk to members of your community over the last couple of days, people are scared to speak out, aren't they?
They're frightened because everyone seems to be for the other. If you say anything, you're petrified because the news will jump on you. That's why people are frightened to speak, because they think the news will jump on you and make something out of it. But I don't care. Our city, we're worried about our kids. Not the Liverpool city centre's full as well. My niece goes into town. First thing I do, get your phone me. There's that many of them in the city centre as well. It's not just in the outskirts. But one thing I'll say, Knowsley is not racist. And that demonstration was not racist. It was not racist. It was about safety for our kids.
Ged, I have to say thank you for coming on and speaking up on behalf of that community. And I hope everybody hears that message articulate, loud and clear. Thank you for joining me down the line. Well, there we are. You tell me, viewers and listeners, do you think the people of Knowsley are far right? I don't think they are for one moment. In a second, we'll analyse why Michael Gove chose to meet with David Lammy, Peter Mandelson and many others to discuss the failings of Brexit and how we can get a closer relationship with the European Union. Is the biggest sellout in history about to begin?
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the people's channel and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed. So I guess they've always been quite woke. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel. Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit off.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go. But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Well, your voices are in and you're pretty clear in your thoughts about whether the people of Knowsley should be called far right. Paula says, no, they aren't. They just care about their children's safety like I do. And when you listen to Ged just before the break, he was on with me down the line, I mean, there was real passion and genuine concern I felt in that voice. One says to me, no, maybe some of them are. Who knows? But I'm sure the vast majority were concerned citizens. And in similar vein, Carl says, some will be clearly, many will be normal people sick of the policy of housing economic migrants without local agreement. Carl, that is right. And it's also worth saying that the Northwest has borne the biggest brunt of this of any part of the country. And you can go right across Merseyside. I've been to Hoylake. I mean, right next to the exclusive Open Championship golf course. That hotel's full up. And Ged again said in his testimony, there are hotels right across Liverpool that are full. And that leads to a lot of young men aimlessly wandering around. And frankly, no good can come of that. I've also made the point before, and I've been shouted down for it, but I'll make it again, that many of these young men come from countries in which women aren't even second-class citizens. They have completely different social attitudes towards women, completely different levels of tolerance towards homosexuality and everything else. And we are storing up for ourselves just the most enormous social problems. Now, I thought in 2016, one of the reasons to vote Brexit was we'd actually get back control of our borders. That simply has not been the case, as the number coming illegally across the Channel rockets, and the numbers coming legally under this government have hit an all-time record. But that wasn't the reason. That wasn't the reason for the big meeting at Ditchley in Oxfordshire, which took place on Thursday and Friday of last week. It was chaired by Lord Mandelson. It was attended by David Lammy. John Healey, Shadow Defence Secretary, was there. Oh, and of course, GlaxoSmithKline were there. And yes, you've guessed it, Goldman Sachs. Goldman Sachs had to be there. I mean, these were the chief globalist Remainers. They're now rejoiners. But what the hell was Michael Gove and a couple of other senior retired Conservatives, what in God's name were they doing there? What we've been told is they were trying to deal with the economic failings of Brexit, the need to get back into a closer relationship with the European Union. And then I thought quite chillingly, they also discussed defence integration and whether we should have a common policy towards China. Well, Ben Habib, London-based property businessman, former Brexit Party MEP, joins me. What on earth is Michael Gove up to? Do you have any idea?
Well, I don't think Michael Gove is a Brexiteer, Nigel. I know he campaigned for Brexit, but the balloon went up for me back in 2017 when he said that we can't leave the EU without a deal. And if you believe the United Kingdom should be an independent sovereign nation, you then don't seek a deal. You should be prepared to leave without a deal. Of course, a deal on the right terms is worth having. But if that is the be-all and end-all of leaving, you're not really a leaver.
And if you announce during a negotiation
that you must have a deal, you undermine your negotiating position completely. It's one of the first things I said when I joined the Brexit Party on the 12th of April 2019, that the minute you announce that you're not prepared to leave without a deal, the counterparty, in this case the EU, knows it's got you by the short and curlies.
Yeah.
And that's precisely what's happened, Nigel.
Yeah, but then, Ben, you're a successful businessman, so you shouldn't be commenting on things like this. But it does seem to me that we had people negotiating a deal that had never, ever done a day's work in the private sector or put deals together.
Yeah, never. And clearly incompetent. You know, we had... What triggered me, I was a mild Eurosceptic, but what triggered me was Osborne saying that we'd have a massive recession if we voted to leave. Carney saying that he had to put £250 billion aside to save the banks in the event we voted to leave. Of course, none of those predictions came true. We were absolutely fine.
No, but the British economy is flatlining. We have business confidence at the lowest levels I've known for literally for decades, the beginning of a brain drain, and a lot of think tanks suggesting that we're losing several percentage points of our GDP every year as a direct result of Brexit.
Well, it's completely wrong.
And that was what brought this summit together at Ditchley.
But it's completely wrong. They're conflating issues and they're attributing to Brexit failed Conservative Party policy for 13 years. The whole point about Brexit was to create an independent, nimble, trading nation that is the UK, putting British national interests first and unhooking ourselves from the EU. What we've got is a highly bureaucratic, highly regulated, highly taxed, interfering state that's bigger than ever. Civil service is completely out of control. The interference in public services is completely out of control. The interference in business is out of control. This government can't help itself but interfere in the private sector. And it views the private sector with antipathy. As we came out of 2 years of lockdown, Nigel, instead of taking the pressure off the private sector by cutting business rates, for example, or cutting corporation tax.
They're putting it up.
They're putting it up. And we saw last week AstraZeneca is not going to set up in the United Kingdom. It's going to set up in Ireland, where the corporation tax rate is 12.5%.
And that's got nothing to do with Brexit whatsoever.
Nothing to do with Brexit. And the other big elephant in the room, of course, is lockdowns, which decimated the UK economy, broke the labour markets, added 33% to our national debt in 2 years. Rishi Sunak, who talks about the need not to pass debt on to the next generation, added more debt to this country's balance sheet than any chancellor in history.
But Ben Habib, the problem is you were a late convert to this belief that we should break free of the European Union. I was doing it for getting on for 3 decades. Our problem is there is a general sense of disappointment in the country about Brexit. How can it be turned around?
But the issue here, Nigel, is not that Brexit has failed. It's that they've failed to deliver Brexit. As you know, myself and a number of other unionists brought a case against the government last week, which was adjudicated last week by the Supreme Court over the Northern Ireland Protocol. Why did we bring that case? Because the Northern Ireland Protocol basically condemned Northern Ireland to being in the EU single market for goods. We knew that was not the United Kingdom leaving as one United Kingdom. That's what Boris Johnson promised. He promised the country would leave the EU as one United Kingdom. When we voted on that bit of paper, it said, do you wish the United Kingdom to leave the EU, not Great Britain? And the Northern Ireland Protocol is not just important to Northern Ireland, it's very important to British citizens in Great Britain.
I mean, this was one of the biggest lies of all. Ben, final thought on all of this. There are many that will say, given what's happening in Ukraine right at the moment, given worries over Taiwan, that actually what was discussed at Ditchley makes sense, that maybe we should have closer military cooperation with the EU. That's an argument we're hearing more of.
I mean, the one thing that should be self-evident to anyone out of Ukraine is that we must never be allied to the EU over foreign policy. The EU tried to undermine our position on Iraq. It tried to undermine sanctions on Iran. It takes a friendly attitude to China when China needs to be challenged. It was sidling up to Ukraine, poking the bear, if you like, for years. And when it came to the fight, actually, Germany had hooked itself on an addiction of Russian fuel.
You couldn't invent it.
And I don't know if viewers know this, but Germany has bought 50 billion euros worth of Russian fuel since sanctions began. Germany is financing the Russian war effort. Thank goodness.
So we're better off, Ben.
Much better off out.
Mismanaging our own country,
I mean, we're very good at mismanaging. But what we've got to do, Nigel, is really Brexit properly. Take back control of our laws, our borders, our cash, our fish, get Northern Ireland back into the United Kingdom, and then chart a path that is for the British people. Not for the Europeans, not for the globalist agenda, but for us. That's what the people want.
Ben, the passion's still there. I'm pleased to see it, but it's certainly gone with Michael Gove. In a moment, what on earth is going on in the skies over North America? Could it be happening here? All of that in 2 minutes' time.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel. Well, a series of balloons or smaller objects being shot down over the course of the weekend. There's been a press conference over the course of the last hour. John Kirby from the US National Security Council has said China has a high-altitude balloon program that is linked to the army. In response, earlier on today, China claimed that the US has high-altitude balloons flying over their airspace, and it's happened 10 times in the last year, to which Kirby responded, there is no US surveillance or aircraft in Chinese airspace. Well, helping us to unpack some of this, or help us to try and unpack some of this, because it's quite tough to get our heads around, is Andrew Feinberg, White House correspondent with The Independent. Andrew, good afternoon. Your time. The first object that was shot down, as I understand it, was a big balloon. What was being shot down over the course of the weekend?
Well, we're not quite sure, and the White House isn't saying much. They're calling them objects, and what they have said is that they assess that these objects pose threats to civil aviation because, unlike the Chinese balloon, these were at much lower altitudes and could interfere with civil aircraft, airliners, and such. So they were brought down. But the White House also has said that they assessed that these were not, as far as they can tell or are willing to say right now, engaged in espionage. They did not have the capability of moving on their own. They did not detect signals coming from them. But because they couldn't rule it out, and they posed the threat to civil aviation, they were shot down.
And so these are genuinely unidentified flying objects. I'm sure some people are speculating about that.
Yes, but the White House also said today these were not extraterrestrials, so not aliens, which is probably a good thing because we've now shot down 3 of them, and if they were aliens, they might be a bit ticked off right now.
That's a very good point. Now, what about the counterclaim? You know, I mean, we've no idea. You know, we were told by some sources that these kind of balloons had flown over many continents, not just North America. But the counterclaim from China is that America is engaged in exactly the same kind of activity. It would be surprising, wouldn't it, Andrew, if America wasn't intelligence gathering in China in some way?
It would be, and I assume you're talking about the first balloon that was shot down off the coast of South Carolina last week. John Kirby said this morning that the U.S. does not have the sort of balloon surveillance program that has been described by U.S. officials as being operated by the Chinese. And that would track with a lot of what we know about U.S. intelligence capabilities. We do have a lot of satellites, which, for the most part, would negate the need for balloons.
Yeah. No, quite. Andrew, thanks for coming on and joining us. We'll wait and see as this mystery unfolds. And quite right, there are so many satellites up there. It's unbelievable. Time for a quick What the Farage moment. I have been saying for a very long time that unless we leave the European Convention on Human Rights, the ECHR, and its associated court in Strasbourg. Unless we do that, we will not solve the migrant crisis, and that any attempt by government to put in new legislation is frankly fiddling around the edges. And I was really pleased to see this morning in the Daily Telegraph centre page Nick Timothy, who of course was a very senior advisor to Theresa May, now writing a piece himself. Britain cannot protect its borders within the ECHR. We must leave it. I tell you what, this campaign is gaining momentum. It's splitting the Conservative Party right down the middle. It is almost like the Brexit battle revisited. But then, unless we do this, we haven't actually completed Brexit. That's my view. We'll debate much more of that over the coming months. In a moment, Ryan Howsam joins me. He is a big, successful entrepreneur, but he's had one or two ups and downs on the way to get there. The Stayshaw Group, many of you perhaps have taken out travel insurance with him. He'll be with me for Talking Pints in a couple of minutes.
First and foremost, I'm a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hi, Andrew Pierce here. Join me every Friday lunchtime for a proper no-nonsense debrief of the week's events. With special guests in the studio and the GB News team on the ground, I'll be getting you up to date with news, some intelligent discussion, and my own sharp take. The weekend starts here with me every Friday lunchtime on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Lawrence Fox, on GB News. Frank, fun, fearless, and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
Well, we'll see. It's time for Talking Pints, my favourite time of the day. Ryan Howsam is a Yorkshire entrepreneur. Welcome to the programme.
Thank you for having me.
Now, we're going to learn, Ryan, about various ups and downs of your life.
Quite a few downs.
And maybe we can learn some lessons from it. So, you're a council house boy from Sheffield. You don't like school very much.
Well, I got thrown out of A-levels, so it wasn't that bad.
You got kicked? Well, you got as far as A-levels?
Yeah, well, I wanted to be a golfer, and, you know, didn't really go down there really, but,
You wanted to be a golfer at that age?
Yeah. I mean, I wasn't quite good enough, but that would have been the big dream, yeah.
That would have been the big dream. And in the end, you decide to become a door-to-door salesman.
Yeah, well, I started knocking on doors, selling. Well, it was actually opening leads for salesmen to go in and sell, and then I'd go out and started closing, glazing, and that was my start into sales. And then I learned everything from the like of Tom Hopkins and Zig Ziglar and all that type of stuff.
So door to door.
Yeah, the hardware. I was brought up.
Double glazing, and yet within a few years, you're making quite a lot of money.
I made a lot of money and lost a lot of money. Yeah.
What makes a good salesman?
The ability to listen, question, isolate, answer, confirm, close. That was what the mantra was as a kid.
Yeah. I know the mantra, but what makes a good salesman?
Yeah, but,
what is that quality?
I think the ability to understand what the customer wants and then to guide them and let them think that they've made the decision to buy.
So you're not selling them stuff that they don't really need?
Well, I did at that point, yeah.
Well, that's at least honest.
Yeah.
But you decide that you want to become an entrepreneur.
Yeah, well, I mean, as soon as I saw, that I could make money from the type of background that I was in, golf became a thing of the past, and I just focused on, trying to make some cash.
Did you feel from your background that it was harder for you in the world of business, or not?
Not at all. But I didn't really know anything about business. I just learned as much as I could about sales. But when I started my first business, I really understood that. Well, quite quickly, there was a lot I didn't understand. Money, for example. I mean, most entrepreneurs don't really understand a great deal about money when they start off.
So they understand about the product they want to sell?
Yeah, potentially, yeah.
And this was you had some success, but your undoing, as it were, which came a few years later. What actually happened?
At that time, I had a business that was selling to, it was hotel rooms, it was hotel broking, and I'd got millions of quite a lot of customers abroad, and I'd not hedged the currency. So I couldn't really afford to hedge the currency. I think the euro, when it was 148, when I bought the product, there's about a 20% margin in it. And then the pound went to 128, and I thought I'll hold on to it, and it went 1-to-1, and that was it.
That was it? You were done?
That was it, 38, and not a pot to piss in.
Excuse the language, we're up before the watershed, but it's all right. So the whole lot gone?
The whole lot gone, yeah.
And what do? You've worked hard, you've been out of school 20 years, you've tried all sorts of things, you've had some success, you've made some money, you've clearly got a bit of flair, and it's all gone wrong. How do you, it's Frank Sinatra, isn't it? Riding high in April, shot down in May. And this is why it's interesting to get people like you on Talking Pints, because how do you recover from that psychologically?
Well, I think the first thing is just never give in. I just didn't have an attitude that, I'm done. At that point, I put my daughter in private school. I moved to Spain. I rented an apartment on the beach, and I basically started a couple of different businesses. Managed to get a little bit of money in from somebody that I knew, and I just got going again, and that was it.
So you believed in your ability to do it again?
I did, but I think one of the big things that I think entrepreneurs get wrong is their ability to focus. And I think that was my Achilles heel. I might have a million ideas a minute, but trying to stay focused on that one thing, that was the hardest thing for me.
Interesting. That is interesting. Actually, one or two entrepreneurs that I know that have been very, very successful, the word focused.
Yeah.
It's interesting. That's a word that does come up. So you're bouncing back, and in the end you decide that it's going to be travel insurance. Why?
Yeah, well, I sort of fell into it. So I formed a 2-for-1 golf business, which it's like half-price golf. So and that was the starting point where I thought, why not do something that I really like? So I got into golf. And then JJB Sport asked me if I could do golf insurance. I thought, well, I'll find a way. So I then found a way of getting golf insurance, created a little bit of technology, and then I turned the golf insurance into travel insurance and just started selling.
Clearly you want to get into insurance.
Yeah, well, actually, no. I mean, it's hard now, with the regulatory status.
You've got to pass exams and do all sorts of things, yeah.
Well, not from an insurance perspective, not if you're owning the business, but with the FCA and all those types of things and the regulatory capital that you've got to have. And I dodged a few bullets in the early days and got umbrellaed by another company. And that's how I got going.
And stay sure, you know, you're now one of the leading travel insurance firms.
Well, the leading travel insurance.
The leading, of course. Well, I opened the door for him there, didn't I? Really.
Yeah.
So you've reached the top of that.
Yeah.
And is that about price competitive? Is it about having a good website? What is it? What's the key thing that makes that work?
Well, I think the key thing with any business is that you've got to own a space. So a lot of people, when they look at a business, they don't really know where they're going with it. And for me, it was going after the over 50s market, and then people with medical conditions, and that was a real focus. Yeah. And we were the first to take medical conditions with travel insurance, put it front and centre of the proposition, and sell it to the consumer that way.
Because so many people I've heard over the years want to go to America, to visit a long-lost relative or whatever it is, but because of a medical condition they've got.
Yeah.
Now, if your medical condition means it's inadvisable to fly, that's a separate issue. But people perhaps, let's say somebody with a form of cancer.
Yeah.
And in the past, America's been impossible for them because they couldn't get travel insurance of any kind at all. How much better is that now?
Well, it's way better, and we led that. But at the time I started this, nobody really knew how to underwrite medical conditions, and me included. So going through a journey to understand that was quite a difficult process. And, you've got to be able to make it work for the underwriter as well as make a margin.
It's got to work for both. Yeah. No, that's really interesting. And now PetSure. Yeah. I mean, pets are so... Everyone bought dogs, puppies during lockdown. They're now realising it's quite an expensive hobby. Again, very expensive, isn't it, pet insurance?
It is expensive, and that's an example of being able to manoeuvre in COVID. You can imagine being in a travel insurance business.
Must have been hard as hell.
Yeah, hard as hell. But, I heard people, some so-called travel insurance professionals saying that there was going to be no travel insurance sales in the middle of COVID. And, we found a way. I mean, I think we did nearly 100 million of turnover right in the middle of COVID. But I didn't want to be there again if it happened. So PetSure, we took the medical conditions, put them front and centre of the proposition, and there's a big gaping hole in that market.
Interesting. You see, gap in the market. This is what you're all about. Now, you've managed, Ryan, to combine business with pleasure. I wonder whether you've done it for really good commercial reasons. Because you are very much involved with the Seniors Golf Tour. You're one of the main sponsors of the tour, or the main sponsor. And this is, just for those that don't understand what the Seniors Golf Tour is, just give us a quick run.
If you can imagine the likes of an Ian Woosnam or a Michael Campbell or a Nick Faldo, these are the players, the greats that you and I know you're a golfer, grew up watching. So it was those. And I actually started to sponsor the tour, and that was with StaySure. And then I became an owner in it, so now I'm a joint owner with the tour. So I basically took sponsorship money, or what I was spending, turned it into ownership, and now we've rebranded that to the Legends Tour. And it's a different proposition, but it's bringing the greats to the front and centre of the consumer.
When a company uses its money, to advertise, to sponsor, is it doing it because the boss likes that sport, or is it doing it for commercial reasons?
Well, it might be. There are lots of football owners, that own clubs that do that. But no, for me, I love it, but I wanted to make sure that I did something that actually made sense. So ultimately, I did it because I thought, owning a sporting franchise is quite powerful. So, that's what I did.
Well, it is powerful. Now the Saudi Arabians are coming in.
Exactly.
Golf.
There's loads of cash. It was quite good timing.
I mean, you might get bought out for some ridiculous sum of money.
Well, we'll see.
They haven't quite got to the seniors yet. And you've also, Ryan, had your own health battles.
Yeah, I had lymphoma 2014, which, for anybody that's been through something like that, they'll know it can be a little bit tough. First day it was like a rabbit caught in the headlights, but after that, you just get on with it.
Yeah, I think the diagnosis is almost the worst bit, isn't it, really?
The first day.
Yeah. I had it. I had a form of cancer myself.
Did you?
Yeah, many years ago, and the initial shock is horrible, but then, as you say, it's head down, get on with it, and hope for the best. And I'm fascinated by this posthumous TV programme, Victor Lewis Smith.
Yeah.
Tell us about that. It's really interesting.
Well, I was talking to Victor with another friend, and we'd looked at these TV programmes that have been, they're out the likes of Dragon's Den and The Apprentice, and I liked them, but Victor hated them. And if you know about Victor, he's quite an outspoken, or he was an outspoken
died
guy
recently.
Recently, very sad. But we just thought that there would be a good programme to see what actually happens with the business. You know, like the end-to-end of the business from the start, and you know, the problems that they have and how they face them, how they get over them. No, it was really exciting, and I, thoroughly enjoyed it.
And the programme's going to come out later on this month, later on this week,
This week,
Yeah, good.
Thursday night.
Well, I have to say, Ryan, one thing about you, you're very good at bouncing back from adversity, which makes you a great guest on Talking Pints.
Thank you. Cheers. Thank you.
It's time for Barrage the Farage. What do you have for me today? Mickey asks, do you agree with positive discrimination when it comes to job appointments, including the armed forces and the police? No, no, and no. I don't agree with it at all. I want to live in a meritocracy. I think the idea that we have quotas and rations for everything, I honestly don't believe we're going to get the best out of it. Ryan, it's a difficult one, isn't it? Because businesses now almost have to have positive discrimination. Does it guarantee the best results?
No, I don't think it does, really. I think it's... No.
No, there we are. A very blunt Sheffield answer there from Ryan, but also quite diplomatic as well. No, look, Nikki, I just don't like it, and remember, Martin Luther King, I want my 4 children to be judged not by the colour of their skin, but the content of their character, and implicit within that, their ability too. Richard asks, is the BBC becoming a danger to the public? Well, Richard, the BBC has a job, and we have to have a licence pretty much in every house in the country. Their job is to be objective. Now, to call them a danger to the public might be going a little bit too far, but they really do lack objectivity. We, on the other hand, we on this channel can have opinions, but equally, we have to give balance to arguments as well. Time for one more, I think. Another viewer asks, is it time for Lord Frost to leave the incompetent and increasingly EU-sympathetic Tory party and join one party which truly stands for independent Britain? Lord Frost is not going to be leaving the Conservative Party any time soon. I'll squeeze in one. Rob asks, the screening process for the police force is abysmal. What would you do to improve matters? Oh, goodness gracious me. Not have positive discrimination. Go on ability. Make policing an attractive thing to do, which I don't think it is for many people at the moment. And I must admit, I have some sympathy with coppers. Whenever you go up to somebody, there's a webcam looking at you. They can take a clip out of context. Not easy. I'm done. I'm back with you tomorrow night at 7 o'clock. But right now, I'm going to hand you over to Patrick Christys.
Yes, fantastic show, Nigel, as ever. Right, well, I've got a bumper one for you tonight as well, ladies and gentlemen, for the next hour. Strap yourselves in. We are, of course, going to be talking about the incidents that have been taking place at that migrant hotel in Liverpool. I'm going to be analysing that, ask how we move on. Oh, and have aliens landed?
Hello again, it's Aidan McGivern here from the Met Office. It's turning into a fine day for many of us, with some sunny spells out there, mild as well, but some frost and fog will return overnight. At the moment, high pressure is still close enough by across the UK to bring largely settled weather, but it's moving to the east, and that's allowing this drier and milder air to drift our way from the near continent. So that's why there are plenty of clear skies out there. Not everywhere, some